Hello and welcome to Aftersound Review, and this time I will review a quite unique product because this is a local product. Just for information that I am an Indonesian, so yeah, I live in Indonesia, and if you have followed through my review, I have reviewed some items that I don't release in English because as far as I know, this brand is not releasing them for international market but rather for a local market. That's why I never release the video for the English version. I never made it in the first place anyway. This is the 7th Acoustics. So this is some kind of still a boutique brand. It's still mostly managed only by one person, but I have to tell you that his tuning is really good. And right now this is his flagship. This is their flagship, the 7th Acoustics Supernova, that is using 6 balance armature, and it is cost around $700. So it's quite a premium price for a local product, but don't let that fool you because they are really magnificent. Okay, so just like usual, I will break down this review from the build, fit, frequency response, sound, and comparison. Okay, from the build quality itself, I should say that it is somehow quite similar to some of the Chi-Fis that I have tried, like the Thea Audio. It is mainly made of resin, and the faceplate is really beautiful. You got that 7th Acoustic logo here with this some kind of purple-ish pearl kind of faceplate, and then you get this Supernova logo here. I hope you could see that. And the body itself is mostly black and it's not translucent. And yeah, it's all made of resin, and you could see that there's some coat around here, and there's some holes for the tubing for the sound in the nozzle. The nozzle itself is quite big, and also it has a little recession for the pin here. It's using 2-pin connectors, and the cable itself is quite thick, and most likely this is copper, but it's quite well made, and I think that the quality is really good. Okay, for the fit, I have to give a little bit of disclaimer first because the default stock tips that you will get when you buy the Supernova is BGVP and also the ASLA, which is somehow combination that is really bad for my ears. Just take a little note that I have small ear holes, and the nozzle itself is quite big. So combine the big nozzle with that quite thick ear tips, I couldn't get a proper seal, whenever I use them, the stock tips, either it's BGVP or the ASLA, I couldn't get a proper seal to get the bass. So in this review, I will using this SpinFit CP100 mostly because this is the one that I can use to get a proper seal. But when I'm using this SpinFit CP100 and I'm using them for hours, I have no problem really, even though they look quite a little big, but I get no sharp edges touching my ears, and I could use them for hours, and then the angle of the ear jet itself is really good. So yeah, I could simply wear them for hours without any complaints. This frequency response is somehow unique. It's really aligned with Crinacle's reference target, especially around the upper mid-range to treble area. At least for me, that looks really aligned with some added bass. But that being said, the added bass is maybe around 5 decibel and it's below 200 Hz, so it's fairly not a big bass boost. I could say that simply the frequency response, it is neutral with bass boost. When it comes to the sound of this Supernova, I have tried them using my phone and then my Ibasso DX160, iFi Zen AirTag, and also the OVD's B1 and QLX 5K, and for me, they are relatively easy to drive. So if you are only using your phone, I think that's enough. It sounds great already, but yeah, definitely I suggest you to try them using your DAC or your dedicated audio source using those balanced one, because when I've compared them, here's the thing, I got 2 cables here. The one is the single-ended 3.5 and the other is 4.4. For me, the separation, imaging, and also the impact and dynamics It's noticeably better on the 4.4, even though maintaining the same tonal balance, but the overall presentation of the sound is just more exciting on using the 4.4. So I suggest you to try using this balanced cable. Okay, let's talk about the tonality, overall tonality of this IM first. I should simply categorize that as somehow neutral with bass boost. And here when I'm talking about neutral, it's somehow a really neutral one, but at the same time it's not the most exciting kind of tonality. It doesn't have a really pushed mid-range or treble area. And also, even though I said there's a bass boost, the bass boost is mainly on the sub bass rather than the mid bass. So it's a really balanced IM, but on the other side, it's somehow maybe quite boring for some people because it's somehow lacking this kind of energy. It's lacking wow factor to it. But nevertheless, let's break it down first from the bass. For me, this is actually, when it comes to quality bass, this is a really good quality bass. I mean, it's focused at the sub bass. It could tell you the depth of the sound, the depth of the bass, and it's controlled. You get that really good punch, but it's not a dynamic kind of bass. So it's not definitely different from dynamic driver bass. When you hear dynamic driver, you hear that there's some kind of bouncy effects. When you hear a bass punch, you don't really get here. You get some kind of, rather than a punch, I feel that it's like a volume in the sub bass. So you still get that clarity on the bass really good, but you don't really get that impact or texture. But nevertheless, if you are not an EDM lover, I think that's still really great choice for a lot of pop kind of song, or maybe a rock, because it's still fast. But for EDMs, for me, the punch and also the texture, it's still lacking, especially in the mid bass area, because it's mainly focused on the sub bass. Okay, and then the mid range, maybe it's one of the best selling point about this IM, because how balanced they sound. When I'm hearing vocal like female vocal Joyce Chu, and then Dinah Krall, and then change them to the Josh Groban or the Il Divo, and then I try to more nowadays pop female vocal song like the Ariana Grande or Taylor Swift. For me, it is simply a really all-rounder kind of mid-range, especially when it comes to human voice. It's a really well balanced. So when I throw female vocal or male vocal, they will sound definitely well balanced, clear, but also really smooth and textured at the same time. But if I have to say that, and here's I'm just being really nitpicking, it's only about the energy. So when I hear Kaale Settles or Hugh Jackman's voice in the Greatest Showman soundtracks, I don't really get that power from this IM. I don't really get that energy from the vocal area, from this Supernova. But when it comes to balancing the sound, the upper mid and lower mid-range, it's really well balanced. I get no shoutiness at all, and I get no wonkiness and strange tonal at all. It's just a really well balanced, but sometimes lacking a little bit of energy. And then piano and guitar also sounds really great. It's natural, and then it's full-bodied, and not full-bodied, I mean it's just neutral, just as it is. You want piano to be full-bodied and you want guitar to be sweet, you get that here. It's just another thing that I should be nitpicking again. When you want electric guitar crunch, maybe electric guitar attack in some rock songs, you don't really get here too. So yeah, it's just the same case with the vocal that I mentioned earlier. It's just lacking this bite effect, it's lacking this forwardness sometimes. And then the treble itself, it's just like the vocal for me, it's quite extended actually, and it can be measured about the extension of this IM, but it's lacking bite. So when you hear cymbals, you hear percussion in a very higher notes, it's really well presented here, but sometimes it's lacking this bite and impact to make music, especially when I hear aggressive cymbals in rock music. It's sometimes lacking in this Supernova, but you get that cymbals, you get that clarity, you get that there's cymbal there, and it's a really clear cymbal. It's just the energy. So the tonality for me, it's almost perfect maybe because it's so balanced, but what I'm lacking here, it's maybe about the dynamics. And then going to the technical part, because of this neutrality that I perceive from this Supernova, actually it doesn't really have this wow effect. And then the soundstage itself, it's more on the two-dimensional side, it's not really three-dimensional. So at first you may not perceive a good resolution and technicality coming from this IM because it's lacking wow factor. But after hearing them for hours and then going back to the timeless, I really have a really great time with the timeless. I still say that it's one of the best IM that you could get for under $500 IMs. And then the timeless, after I hear the Supernova for hours, sounds somehow cramped, and it just feels so much closer in the instrument and the vocalist position. It feels so much closer, and I don't really get a clear separation between the player of the music and then the vocalist, not as clear as I get in this Supernova. So even though it's lacking wow factor, it's not really wow at first to listen to, but after you listen from them for hours, you will realize that they actually have really good separation performance, and also it has really good clarity. So yeah, it's still a really good IM in terms of technicality and also tonality. The thing that might get you turned off at first because how neutral and sometimes may be boring for some people. Okay, when it comes to comparison, I have to say that for $700, there are some IM that I regard as the best choice at this price point, such as the Moondrop S8 or the Thea Audio Clairvoyance. Those two are for me really great IMs, but they and also the Supernova have different kind of wow factor and have their kind of different fortes too. When it comes to the Moondrop S8, for me, when I hear the three of them at the same time, the Moondrop S8 is the most forward sounding, it's the most impactful, and also maybe you perceive that it's the clearest one of the three. But at the same time, if you hear them for long enough, the Moondrop S8, because it has this forward upper mid-range and it shows in the frequency measurement, that upper mid-range forwardness definitely helps with the clarity. But after hearing them for quite some times, it will get, for me, I get this kind of fatigue. It gets kind of shouty, especially when I hear music like The Greatest Showman. If I hear the From Now On, or if I hear the Kaale Settles and This Is Me, or Zac Efron's Rewrite the Stars, I feel that I find definitely shoutiness in the Moondrop S8, even though it gives a really good clarity and notes impact and it sounds really clear, but it gets quite fatigue after sometimes because it's also really closed IM. It's really have this kind of vacuum effect after sometimes. And then the Thea Audio Clairvoyance is the most majestic sounding of the three. It has the best three-dimensional presentation, and also it has the best bass amongst the three. It's the most natural, it's the most for me real to life effects. You get that punch, you get that bounciness. Of course, it's the one that is using a dynamic driver, but it's the slowest of the three. So when I hear rock music, sometimes I do feel that the Clairvoyance could get a little bit slower than the three. And also, even though it has the biggest sound stage and also very liquid-like mid-range, it's really smooth and silky smooth. But the main critic for me for the Clairvoyance are one, the fit, and also how big they are. When I'm using them, I never feel comfortable, no matter what kind of ear tips I've tried. And then the incoherency that I find after hearing them for some quiet time. You will definitely hear that the bass is kind of slow-ish compared to the very fast treble that they are using electrostatic driver, yeah. Sometimes you really get that there are three kind of driver working together, but sometimes the transient and so the decay, it's not monogamous. It's just how to say it, it just feels kind of detached somehow and not really coherent. it's not really cohesive as the Moondrop S8's driver or this Supernova's driver. At the other side, the Supernova, it's not as clear as the S8, it's not as forward as the S8, it's not as grandiose, it's not as majestic as the Theaudio Clairvoyance. But when I'm hearing them for quite some times, and I hear them for quite a long time, for me that I perceive that the Supernova is the most balanced of the three, and I could hear them the longest. It doesn't have this vacuum effect that I found the S8, it doesn't have that shoutiness from the S8, while maintaining a really great sense of separation and clarity. I don't get that sense of incoherency, incohesiveness that I found in the Theaudio Clairvoyance, and also the body of this, the fitting, I mean, of this Supernova itself is better than the Clairvoyance. So yeah, absolutely, I believe that a lot of people that tries three of them at the same time will perceive that the S8 and also the Clairvoyance has more wow effect, so it might it might impress you the more at first you listen to them. But take some quiet time with them, the three of them, and hear them for sometimes, use maybe around a half hour maybe, or use some music with them, and maybe you will find this similar conclusion to mine. It's the Supernova, even though it's not as wow as the Moondrop S8 or the Clairvoyance, but somehow I could simply hear them the longest because it's the most balanced of the three. It's also really cohesive, it's coherent. It's for me, if you ask me which one should I choose, which one that I like the most, I should say that surprisingly it is the Supernova. So I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you have any question, please write down in the comments below, and see you next time. Bye bye.